I didn't expect the retreat to feel this quiet. The brochures had promised community, healing, connection, all those big words they print in calm fonts. But after the opening session ended, most people scattered into little clumps, claiming corners of the garden or the long tables in the dining hall. I found myself alone at the back, balancing a chipped mug of coffee that tasted more like burned bread than anything. I wasn't the only one drifting. That's when I noticed them. 3 women, maybe mid-40s, maybe older, sat together near the windows. They weren't talking much, just watching people come and go. Their clothes were simple but carried the kind of ease you only learn after years of not needing to impress anyone. One of them caught me staring for too long, the one with dark hair pinned back, the kind of face you'd remember even if you only saw it once. She tilted her head slightly, as if she'd caught me reading over her shoulder. I looked down at my coffee, folded the napkin under it into a crooked square, tried to look like I belonged to myself. Later, when the rain started, most of the group huddled inside. I stayed out on the covered porch, watching the drops streak down the wooden railing. A voice joined me. You'd think for the price, they could at least serve drinkable coffee. It was her. The dark-haired one. She held her cup in both hands like she didn't really want it, just needed something to do with her fingers. I half smiled. Burned bread? She blinked, then laughed. Low, unforced, almost startled. Exactly that. We stood there, the silence soft around us. The others inside filled the space with clinking plates and polite retreat chatter, but out here, I could hear the rain, the buzz of a porch light. I noticed the faint lines near her mouth when she smiled, the way her thumb traced the rim of her mug. You're younger than most here, she said finally. Not unkind, just curious. I shrugged. Yeah. Guess I was looking for something different. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. The door opened behind her, and the other 2 women from her table called her name. She glanced back at them, then at me, with a look I couldn't place, half apology, half something else. She left before I could think of a reply. That night, in the shared dorm room, I pretended to scroll through my phone though there was no service. I opened a text draft I never sent to anyone. Just the words, "Coffee wasn't so bad with you there." Then I deleted it. The retreat ran on a schedule: morning yoga, group circles, silent meals. I moved through them half present, always catching glimpses of her with the other 2. Sometimes she caught me watching. Sometimes she didn't. On the 3rd evening, after another round of speeches about mindfulness and releasing the past, I found a folded piece of paper slipped under my mug on the dining table. No name. Just a line, written in quick, steady handwriting: "Come sit with us tomorrow. We've decided you're too quiet for your own good." I read it twice, then tucked it into my pocket. I could still feel the faint press of the ink through the paper. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I wasn't sure if the silence I carried everywhere was going to hold. The next morning, I found the note again in my pocket, edges softened from being folded and unfolded too many times. I told myself it was nothing, a playful gesture, something anyone could have done. But when I walked into the dining hall, all 3 women looked up from their table at once. She was the one who gestured to the empty chair. The dark-haired woman. I sat. The other 2 kept the conversation light, trading jokes about the bland oatmeal, teasing each other about who had skipped yoga. She didn't say much, but every now and then, I felt her eyes flick toward me, like checking if I was still there. At one point, she asked, "So, what made you sign up for this place?" The question wasn't loaded, but it landed heavy. I could have said stress, burnout, trying to reset. All the words they wanted to hear. Instead, I heard myself say, "I didn't want to keep eating dinner alone." Her expression didn't change right away, but something softened at the edges. She looked down, stirred her tea with the end of her spoon. Then she said, "My daughter just left for university. First week she was gone, I kept setting out 2 plates without realizing." She gave a small laugh, but it didn't erase the pause that hung after. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, too aware of how close her hand rested on the table to mine. The others drifted off to a workshop, leaving us still at the table. She tilted her mug toward me. Want to walk? We ended up on the garden path behind the retreat house, the gravel crunching under our steps. She talked about books she never finished, jobs she left behind, the way time seemed to slip faster once you reached your 40s. I listened, trying not to let the thought form too clearly, she's twice my age. She should see me as a kid. And yet, every time she turned toward me, every time her voice caught on a memory, it didn't feel like that. It felt like standing in the same weather, not ahead or behind. We stopped by the small pond. The water was still, reflecting a blur of gray sky. She crouched to pick up a flat stone, turning it over in her palm. I noticed the lines in her hands, the chipped nail polish, the way she hesitated before tossing it across the surface. The stone skipped twice before sinking. I wanted to tell her something honest, something that would place me closer to her. But instead I just said, "Not bad." She smiled, but didn't answer. Her sleeve brushed against mine as we stood there, not moving. A quiet gesture, accidental maybe. But I felt it all the same, the warmth, the risk, the silence that filled in the rest. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The garden path became our pattern. Not planned, but we found each other there more often than not, after meals, between sessions. Sometimes she carried a thermos of tea, sometimes just her silence. I started to expect it, though I never admitted that even to myself. One afternoon, it almost felt too easy. She handed me the thermos without asking, and I drank straight from it, the faint trace of her lipstick around the rim. My throat caught. I didn't comment. She didn't either. We sat on a bench by the pond, the same place as before. The air was cooler that day. She pulled her sweater tighter around her and looked out at the water. "Feels like September sneaks in earlier every year," she murmured. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but the words slipped away. My hand hovered near hers on the bench. Too near. Not near enough. Then the sound of footsteps. One of the other women from her group. The tall one. She called out, teasing. "You two hiding out again?" Her hand moved instantly, from the bench, from me, to adjust the strap of her bag. She smiled back at the friend, a quick cover, then rose before I could react. "Coming," she said. No explanation to me. Just gone. The silence she left behind pressed heavier than the footsteps fading. That night, in the dorm, I replayed the way she pulled back. Wondered if I'd imagined the closeness, the small permissions. Maybe I'd been reading into things, seeing what I wanted. I scrolled my phone again, pointlessly. The draft text from before, the one I never sent, hovered in my memory. The next morning, she wasn't at the usual table. I sat alone. Coffee went cold. The napkin I folded tore along its crease. By late afternoon, I finally saw her on the porch. She was alone, staring out at the trees. I hesitated, then joined her. "You disappeared," I said, softer than I meant to. She didn't look at me right away. "I just needed space." A pause. "It's complicated." I nodded, even though I didn't understand. She rubbed her palms together, restless. "You're young," she added, almost whispering. "Too young." It stung, but her voice wavered, and that told me something else. It wasn't dismissal. It was fear. The silence stretched. I watched her thumb press against her palm, leaving small dents in the skin. I wanted to take her hand, smooth them out. She glanced at me then, sudden and sharp, like she'd caught the thought before I could hide it. Our eyes held. The air between us tightened. She opened her mouth. Closed it. I leaned a fraction closer, not enough, too much. The porch light buzzed above us, loud as a warning. And then, nothing. Just her turning away, her breath catching like she'd almost said something she couldn't. The retreat was already half over when the schedule shifted. She wasn't at the porch, wasn't at the pond. I caught myself scanning rooms too often, pretending I was looking for something else. By the fourth day, I saw her again, on the back path, walking alone. I almost didn't follow. Almost. She heard me before I caught up. Skipping the circle tonight? She asked without looking back. Too many voices, I said. She nodded. Her hands were in her pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. We walked without speaking for a while. The gravel crunched under our shoes, a rhythm that felt steadier than words. At the curve near the orchard fence, she stopped. Leaned against the wood railing. The fading sun caught strands of her hair, silver flickering through the dark. I shouldn't. She trailed off, shaking her head. This? Her hand lifted, as if to sketch the space between us. It doesn't make sense. I tried to answer, but nothing sounded right. Too heavy, too light. Instead I said, You think I don't know that? Her eyes flicked to me then, sharper than I'd ever seen. Do you? I wanted to step closer. I didn't. I just tightened my grip on the rail until my knuckles showed. Every time you disappear, I think maybe I imagined it. That none of this was real. Her breath caught, not dramatic, just a tiny sound. But it cracked something open. She turned her face toward the orchard, voice low. My husband left 3 years ago. I still flinch at the word divorce. A pause. And my daughter, she'd laugh if she knew. Or worse. She laughed herself, but the sound thinned in the air. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt tight. She shifted, pulling her hands out of her pockets, pressing her palms flat on the railing. You make me forget. That's the problem. The air pressed close. I heard every insect, every far-off voice from the main house. I heard my own pulse, too loud. I don't want to be a problem for you, I said finally. It came out uneven, not steady like I meant. She turned then. Really turned. Our faces were closer than they had ever been. Her eyes searched mine, not rushing, not flinching, as if she were memorizing something she wasn't supposed to keep. I almost leaned in. She almost let me. The orchard wind shifted, carrying the smell of apples just turning ripe. She blinked, and I saw her walls rebuild, brick by brick, even as her lips parted like the words might still escape. Tell me, she started. The rest hung there, unfinished. The question never came. Or maybe it did, in the silence between us. The next morning, she was gone. Not from the retreat, but from everywhere I had grown used to finding her. No porch, no pond, no empty seats saved at the table. I lingered longer than I should have, pretending to refill my coffee, walking the long way around the garden. Nothing. By evening, I saw her across the hall during a group exercise. She didn't look at me. Didn't even flick her eyes in my direction. She sat with the others, head bent over her journal, nodding at whatever the instructor was saying about mindful presence. I told myself not to care. Not to read into it. But the silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't absence anymore. It was avoidance. The following day, I broke the pattern. I didn't go to the garden. I didn't wait for her. Instead, I sat in the library, a small converted room with shelves of mismatched paperbacks. The place smelled of dust and lemon polish. I pulled a book at random and stared at the words without seeing them. When the door creaked open, I looked up too quickly. It wasn't her. Just someone passing through. My stomach dropped harder than it should have. Later, at dinner, one of the women she always sat with leaned across the table and said, half joking, She's been keeping to herself. Don't take it personally. I forced a smile. I wasn't. But I was. That night, I walked back to the dorm slower than usual, letting the cold air sting. I replayed everything. Her confession about the divorce, the orchard railing, the near question that never finished. Maybe that had been the edge, the line she realized she couldn't cross. In the room, I pulled out my phone again, even though I knew there was no service. I typed. I didn't mean to make things harder. Just being around you felt like breathing again. I stared at the screen. Deleted it. Typed another, Do you want me to leave you alone? Deleted that too. In the end, I left the draft blank. Just the cursor blinking, waiting for a sentence I couldn't write. The retreat moved on, the days blending. I saw her less, and when I did, her face stayed unreadable, polite nods, a half smile once. Nothing more. It wasn't heartbreak I felt. Not really. It was something thinner, stranger. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Her chair at the porch stayed empty the next night. I didn't sit in it. I couldn't doubt it happened the second to last night. Most of the retreat had gathered for a closing circle in the main hall, but I stepped outside instead. I wasn't ready to sit in a room where everyone talked about growth and gratitude. The kitchen lights glowed through the window. When I pushed the door open, she was there, rinsing out a mug at the sink. She turned at the sound, startled, then stilled. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, she set the mug down. I thought you'd be with the others. I could say the same, I replied. That earned the smallest smile, but it didn't last. She dried her hands slowly on a towel, folding it, unfolding it, as if that task was safer than looking at me. I leaned against the counter. My throat tightened. You've been avoiding me. She stopped folding. Her eyes stayed on the towel. I had to. Before it, she shook her head. Before it went too far. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. Too far. I repeated, quieter. Her shoulders sank. You don't understand what it would cost. For me. For you, maybe later. I didn't answer right away. The refrigerator hummed between us, the clock above the stove ticked. My hands pressed flat against the counter, grounding myself. I don't want to be another weight for you, I said finally. But when I'm around you, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels like... I trailed off, unable to finish. She turned then. Her eyes were tired but clear. You make me forget. And forgetting feels dangerous. Something in my chest nodded. I took a slow breath. Maybe it's okay to forget. For just a little while. She closed her eyes, pressing the towel to her chest. You're too young to believe that. I almost stepped closer, almost reached out. But instead I asked, then why did you leave that note? Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened on the towel. Because I wanted you near me. And I didn't want to admit it. The silence between us felt fragile, like glass that could crack with one more word. She finally looked up, meeting my eyes. For once, no guard, no careful cover. Just raw, steady presence. I didn't move. Neither did she. But in that stillness, something passed between us, not a confession, not a kiss, not a promise. Just the truth, plain and undeniable. Her hand rested on the counter, inches from mine. I let my fingers brush against hers, barely touching. She didn't pull away. We stood like that, holding nothing more than the smallest contact, but it was enough to feel the weight of everything unspoken. After a long silence, she whispered, "Okay." And it was. The retreat ended the next morning. People hugged, exchanged numbers they'd never use, promised to stay in touch. I packed quickly, not trusting myself to linger. When I carried my bag outside, she was already by the gate, speaking with the other two women. She didn't look my way, not at first. But when their shuttle arrived, she broke from them for a moment. Just a step closer. Her voice low enough only I could hear. Take care of yourself. It wasn't a promise. But it stayed with me, heavy as a secret. Weeks passed. Life pulled me back into its rhythm, classes, errands, late night scrolling. But the silence inside me felt different now. Not empty, not as sharp. More like space I'd finally learned to live in. Sometimes, around 8:47 a.m., I'd catch myself pausing on the walk to class, the same time we once sat on that bench by the pond, sharing burned coffee and rain light. I didn't always think of her. But when I did, it didn't ache. It just settled. Then one afternoon, in the corner of a bookstore downtown, I saw her again. Not planned. Not staged. She was crouched by the travel shelf, tilting her head to read spines. For a moment, I almost didn't believe it. When she noticed me, there was that same small tilt of her head, the one from the very first day. This time, I didn't look away. We ended up in the cafe next door, sitting across from each other with mismatched mugs. She ordered tea. I ordered black coffee. Neither of us mentioned the retreat. Neither of us needed to. We talked about ordinary things, her daughter adjusting to school, my thesis dragging longer than I wanted. We didn't name the silence that wove through our words, but it was there. Familiar. Softer than before. At one point, she reached for her mug, and I noticed the faint trace of chipped polish again. My eyes flicked down, the same way they had at the pond. This time, she let her hand rest on the table, close to mine. Not touching. Not needing to. It wasn't love in the way movies show it, no grand declarations, no sweeping gestures. It was quieter than that. Earned in pauses, in unfinished sentences, in the way we both leaned back and exhaled at the same time, like the world had finally slowed enough for us to catch it. When we left, we walked out side by side. The air smelled of rain, though the sky hadn't broken yet. She glanced at me once, not speaking, but her look carried something I understood without words. Only we would remember the weight of burned coffee, or the buzz of a porch light that stopped us from saying too much. Only we would know that silence could mean okay. And it was. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?